We do need to have a conversation about Black women and erasure. And I'm going to, I jotted down a definition of erasure. I know it's a term you may not hear or you may not have heard often. And there may not be a whole lot of people on the internet talking about Black women and erasure, or essentially the Black women being erased. And before I read this definition, a lot of times when you hear the term erasure, it is in the context of like the civil rights movement. So of course, and you all may know that Black women in history who unfortunately we will never know their full contributions. We may not know their names. We may not know their full stories. I just learned a story of a kind of like, I want to call it like a backstory about Rosa Parks that I had never heard of before. And, so we usually talk about erasure in the context of just Black women being erased historically, which is true. But I want to talk about it from a different angle today. And I'm going to start by reading the definition, or, this is kind of a compilation definition. So erasure can be ignoring, it can be canceling, deleting, making a person or a group of people invisible. And just in general, it speaks to the lack of visibility. And in this case, I'm talking about Black women. So that's just a definition that I gathered based on, different definitions. But going back to why I wanted to write a book, and more specifically, why did I want to write a memoir at 40? A lot of people write memoirs at 60 or 70 or maybe even 50. I think that, well, one, I acknowledge that, I don't take life for granted, number one. But also, I think the root of that is I do not want to be erased. I do not want my story to be misconstrued. I want to make sure that I am adding a voice into this world. And, we don't know. Tomorrow is not promised. I don't know what's going to happen. I want to make sure that I am documenting and archiving and preserving my own story, because I know that there are a lot of Black women who unfortunately did not have the opportunity to do that. And also white people have documented, preserved, and, in many ways misconstrued their stories. So that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to write a memoir at 40 years old. And that will be available very, very soon. So, okay. I have notes as always. I want to start this. To be honest with you, it's hard to know where to start, but I'm going to start this with a woman's name. Her name is Kashan Thompson. And if you have not heard of her, I want you to look her up. I recently discovered who she even is. I had no clue. And Kashan Thompson coined the phrase Black Girl Magic. So this might have been maybe back in 2013-ish. She coined Black Girl Magic. And there's a video, and I'll do my best to link that in the description. Kimberly, I believe her name is Kimberly Nicole Foster, who is a popular Black woman YouTuber. She did a video highlighting Kashan's story. And essentially, the video is about how Kashan Thompson was essentially erased from the very phrase and movement she created, which is, Black Girl Magic. We all know, we see Black Girl Magic everywhere. We use hashtag Black Girl Magic. We say Black Girl Magic. It has been commodified. Think about how many, billboards or t-shirts or, magazines. Think about how often you see this. Probably even hair products. The woman who is behind that, the woman who invented and created Black Girl Magic, has been erased from what she started. And the crazy thing is that she tried, at one point to sort of get a handle on it and, kind of trademark it and figure out, well, how can she claim this as hers? And if you Google Kashan Thompson, I was surprised to see that Google does acknowledge her now as being, the first person to coin Black Girl Magic. However, I don't know if she had to fight to get that on Google. I know it was, and she's still, and I don't know if she's still fighting, but, she's still doing her best to, try to, I can't even say, well, I guess I can say reclaim it, because it has just gotten out of control. Like, everyone's using it, and no one acknowledges or knows, more importantly, maybe they would acknowledge it if they knew, no one knows where it came from. But here's the thing, and this is why I want you to actually, if you have the time to look at this interview, and the funny thing is, Kimberly Nicole Foster, she's an amazing YouTuber, and a lot of her videos get like 100,000 views, easy, like well over 100,000 views. This one actually did not do as well. So I don't know if that means a lot of people aren't interested in this topic or what. But if you have the chance, check out the video, because one of the most powerful things that Kashan Thompson said was that she felt like Black Girl Magic, although she created and invented this sentiment, and it was a gift to Black women to sort of uplift them, in many ways she felt alienated because she was not the quote-unquote right type of Black woman. And when I heard her say that, it like gave me chills, because as a Black woman, I know exactly what she's talking about. Like, someone can try to gaslight and say, well, what do you mean the right type? We all know. I mean, she, and you didn't see the video, but Kashan Thompson is a plus size woman. She is I wouldn't really say she's dark skinned, but she's not light skinned. She's not a light skinned woman. She doesn't look mixed. She, I believe, said that she doesn't have a degree, and she's a single mom. And so in many ways, it just made me think of, wow, how would her story be different if all of her intersecting identities fit the narrative of whoever, and this goes back to the Black excellence conversation, if she fit the look of Black excellent Kashan Thompson, college educated, married, thin, whatever else, if she fit that, how would her story have been different? Because she met with lawyers and everything, and it seemed like she just couldn't get ahead of it, and just felt defeated, and as she said, alienated from something she created. So it's a powerful story, and I think it speaks to what a lot of Black women have experienced. And so I kind of want to use that to set up this conversation about modern, and again, I'll say modern, I'm going to put educated in there, but educated really doesn't need to be in there. Modern, educated, plus size Black single mothers. And now we're going to get on the men who love to hate them. So I set it up with a story about Kashan Thompson. I'm going to talk a little bit about one of my past relationships, and then we're going to go back into Black women. So I dated someone who was I would call him maybe a pretty avid YouTube watcher, and I am too. So by the way, I exclusively watch YouTube. I don't even watch TV. So I dated someone similar to me, watched a lot of YouTube, and he would, and let me just kind of set this all up. We live together. So this is a relationship where we were living together. I have a child, and so that's the setup there. So I would see him sometimes watching videos on YouTube, and maybe either inquire about what he's watching or why he was laughing. And he would say to me, oh, well, you can't handle this. Like, I can't reveal this to you. And I would be like, okay, that's interesting. So eventually over time, he did share with me, a couple of the YouTubers that he would listen to. And so once he started sharing that information, I took it upon myself to look these people up and just to check out some of their videos to see what kind of content they were making and just kind of, again, curious why he would be laughing hysterically to himself. And so it was at that time, I think I stumbled upon Kevin Samuels. And when him and I would argue, or, have a disagreement or a discussion, it was always weird because he would point out the fact that I was a single mom. And it was just random. He would also, make comments about other Black women single mothers. And I would have to remind him that, hello, as you're saying this pretty offensive thing about this other Black woman who's also a single mom, I just want to remind you, I am too, right? And I was just wondering, how in the world was he making sense of all of this, And so once I started listening to some of Kevin Samuels' videos, it all clicked. And I was like, oh, wow, he's part of this group, which I believe they call themselves the Manosphere. I don't know much about them other than, they're a group of men. I think all men, but I think a lot of them are Black men online. And they essentially have a narrative. And if you have watched any of Kevin Samuels' videos, I know he just recently passed away. If you have watched any of his videos, you probably have a sense of what I'm talking about. So then I had to kind of reconcile the fact that, this is the kind of doctrine that he's buying into. This informs a lot of his belief system. Kevin Samuels and all these other, men, many of whom were Black men, are saying all these negative things about Black women, plus size women, single moms, modern women, and educated women. Those were like a lot of my identities. Like everything I just named was me. And I'm like, but this is somebody who not only am I living with, we are talking about getting married. We are talking about starting a family. And how do I reconcile his beliefs that he's hiding from me? How do I reconcile that with like my reality of being all of these things that he clearly despises? Because again, when we would have disagreements and arguments, he would throw it in my face like it was an insult. And I'm like, okay, everything you're throwing in my face, I'm not insulted by, because I am that. And I'm, like, yes, I am a single mom. And, and then just other random things like, this whole thing about being an alpha male. Those things would come up in arguments, and it would just be like, like all of these things sounded like it was from the internet. Like if you're arguing or having a disagreement with someone, who in their right mind is going to just blurt out, I'm an alpha male or I'm an alpha female? Like, why would you do that? That's irrelevant to whatever it is you're talking about. So that was eye-opening. And needless to say, that relationship did not last. And I also want to say that the plus size part actually was not an issue. And to be honest with you, it's actually never been an issue in any of my relationships. However, again, it was still very bizarre to me that he was following a group of men who despise plus size women, but he was with one. And even though he would, again, he seemed to be very into me in terms of my look, but it still was strange because I'm like, okay, how I was wondering, how is he managing, the fact that, so this led me down to a road of, and I feel embarrassed to say this, but really kind of diving into some of this stuff that Kevin Samuels was putting out on the internet. And not because I, was seeking validation or wanting to be a part of it. I was almost fascinated. And then once I started watching the videos, confused. And then even beyond that, it was like, wow, this is sad. And it was like, as you can see, I'm very much into like cultural commentary. So it essentially gave me somewhat of a read on the pulse of certain pockets of Black America. It did. And I know it doesn't represent, the views of Kevin Samuels and the women that were calling in on his show. Obviously, it does not represent the way all black people think. But these were like real black people calling in. These were real black women. Kevin Samuels was a real black man giving this advice. So I started tuning in almost like a case study. And when a black woman who fit all the identities that I just named, again, modern, well, most black women are obviously modern, but modern, educated, plus size. And then if you tack on the single mother just as a cherry on top, her experience calling in on that show was like horrifying. And then it made me really question, well, what is going on with black women? Because many of them knew and were completely aware of his platform, what he talked about, how he speaks to women, that they likely was not going to leave there within, especially if you were plus size. I mean, maybe if you were just a single mom, but you were thin and you kind of had the look, you might leave with some advice that wasn't completely demeaning. But if you added the plus size in there, oh yeah, you were going to get ripped apart, completely ripped apart. And so I was confused about, and not even just confused, I was, I was just, it was just shocking. It was shocking to see that these women calling on this show and thinking, and I don't know if it was seeking validation or seeking whatever it was, is their self-esteem that low that they have to call this man to be told that their market value is way low unless they lose a ton of weight, okay? Or their market value is way, way low because they have a child, or, they're low value because they have degrees. And it was like, these women, you probably, for the most part, know what he's going to say. And why do you think if you call, he's going to give you any different opinion than he's giving all these other women who fit all those intersecting identities? I don't think that everything Kevin Samuels and men in the manosphere, I don't think that everything said is false. I think that there were some points that he made that were true. Absolutely. However, my issue with all of his content, or most of it, was that essentially this is my opinion, I believe that it contributed to the erasure of not only just black women, but let's go back to Kashan Thompson, a certain type. The average woman, in terms of size, the average woman in America is a size 16. I know at one point it was a size 14. Last time I checked, it was a size 16, right? I think it's widely known at this point that black women, when it comes to excelling as far as education wise, we outperform black men. Now that could be from a variety of different reasons. Just speaking off of, and of course, there's probably more black women out here in the world and able to enroll in college, but we are definitely getting degrees. We're degreed up. There's no question there. Obviously, we're all modern. We're living in modern times. This is the 21st century. I'm describing the average woman, the average black woman, being a single mom. Of course, and I tell my daughter this, obviously it's always, in my opinion, preferred to have a child in the context of marriage. We all know that marriages don't work out. People get divorced. People unfortunately pass away. There's a lot of different reasons why and how a woman can become a single mom. So going back to, Kevin Samuels and some of his content and essentially his belief system, his doctrine, not only was he speaking to the average or typical black woman that would call his show, everything he was against, it was like he was against your everyday black woman, right? And almost like he was trying to create this false narrative that like the average woman was supposed to be something different. Like, and I do understand the tone and the context that, women will call in and say, well, I want a man who makes, $500,000 a year. I want a quote unquote high value, which I don't buy into that either, but I want a quote unquote high value man. And Kevin Samuel's job was to sort of bring them down to reality and say, hey, look, there's very small percentage of men, especially black men, who fit that mold and fit that small circle that you're trying to be a part of, and let me help you sort of be more realistic. That I get, and that actually makes sense to me. But I think it might have started there, but it went from that narrative to, let me go beyond this. And mind you, some women were just calling in saying, I just really want to meet someone who's, it wasn't even, a lot of times it wasn't even about high value. I mean, yes, some women did say that, but it was more about they just want to meet a good man, or they just want to meet a man who's somewhat accomplished. They want to meet a man who's not lazy and a bum. A lot of women weren't really saying, I want someone wealthy. But for him to take it upon himself and use those moments as an opportunity to tear women down, to talk about their weight, to ask them, well, what's your pant size? How much do you weigh? Or sorry, what's your dress size? How much do you weigh? What did the scale say the last time you got on it? It was like, what? And you're going to sit there and answer that? And you're going to sit there and just like allow this man, who is he? I mean, mind you, he got his start on YouTube. Same thing I'm doing right now. I can't imagine. Eventually I'm going to start doing interviews. I cannot imagine tearing down my guests like that. And then for the guest to have the audacity to continue to call me. Why would you're going to keep calling me after it's insane. It's as someone who is interested in cultural, like black people and culture, and it is wild. And you can say, well, okay, but that was only a small population of black women. There was a lot of women who actually never made it on the show. They wanted to talk to him. They just, and then so many women will call in and be like, oh my God, I'm so happy that I've been trying to get on your show for the last 2 weeks. I mean, this was like big. I mean, he made a mark in the culture of black America. He did. And most black people know who he is. And if you don't know, you've heard of him. So, I want to say something about women and how, I hate to say this, but some of us contribute to our own erasure. Some of us do. Some of us are contributing. We can't always blame someone else for ignoring us or, deleting us or making us invisible. This comes to light in my book, which again you'll be able to read soon. But we have to also take responsibility for some of the erasure that we perpetuate amongst ourselves. Because why are you allowing someone who came off from the internet out of nowhere and just really grew and built a following and is publicly known to demean women, specifically black women, who look a certain way, again, the certain type of black woman, and you know this, and yet you do your best to seek validation from this person and from that group. Why? Some women are single mothers, not just because they were out here thotting around. And, some women are single mothers because the man did not step up to the plate. Because the man didn't want to take responsibility. Kevin Samuels often like to go back to like the 1950s and say, well, women aren't the way they used to be. And, women used to be this way, and women used to be this size, and women used to do things like this. But what about the men? Because in the 1950s, if a woman got pregnant, a lot of times, I think it was pretty commonplace for the man to marry her. It doesn't happen anymore. So yes, women, we have a responsibility to play, obviously, but so do men. Being a modern woman is not bad. Again, that was over and over, modern women, and as a modern, and it was almost framed as a bad thing to be modern and contemporary. No, this is 2022. Like, you should be modern. If you're not modern, hey, something is wrong. You should be modern, and you should embrace that. And what that means is, as a modern woman, you probably have a job. Maybe you have a 9 to 5. Maybe you're an entrepreneur. If you are a single mom, that means that you're providing. You are protecting. Now, granted, I get it. We obviously, the goal is we want a man to do that, but we're not all in that position to have that. And if we don't have it, what are we going to do? Just sit and cry? No, we have to step up. So if you are a single mom, you better step up and be modern, and you're going to have to work. You're going to have to provide. You're going to have to, hopefully if you're educated, or even if you're not educated, if you're accomplished in some way, or you have a trade or a skill, you have to use it. You have to use it. And I am definitely against this whole framing of modern as a bad thing or a negative thing. Completely against that. I'm passionate about this topic because I can bet money that many of the men who are against and have a disdain for modern educated or even modern plus size black single mothers, many of them were probably raised by this same type of woman. Many of them depend on this type of woman. They probably depend on this type of woman in ways that they're not even aware of. This represents, and maybe not the single mother part, but the modern, again, the plus size. Keep in mind, plus size is there's people on the smaller end and the larger end. So plus size doesn't always mean what people think it means. You could be a size 10, which to me is pretty small, and still be considered plus size. You're still not going to be, if you're a 10, that's still not in the realm of what Kevin Samuels said was quote unquote acceptable, right? So that's the irony, is that these men have sisters, these men have aunties, nieces, daughters, mothers, they're always interacting with, customer service, and they may have housekeepers, or, whoever they're interacting with in the world look like and may fit many of these identities that they're against. So strange. And what I didn't tack on to this conversation, which is a whole nother topic, is you can add dark skin on that. You can add natural hair on that. So then we got the modern, plus size, educated, black, dark skin, single mother with natural hair. And you know what? There's a lot that represents a lot of black women. So thank you for listening. I may have a slight part 2 because there's some points that I didn't make, but thank you for tuning into this topic, and hope you learned something. Feel free to comment and stay tuned for more. Bye.